Our next speaker is Tom van der Lubbe. He's the co-founder of Viisi, a financial services company that offers mortgage solutions, but probably most interestingly, that is a company founded upon a very provocative management style. Besides that, he acts as an advisor on organizational design, purpose, and leadership themes. I would like to reflect one of my favorite quotes of him. He says that, "I believe the purpose of a business is not the business, but the purpose itself." He sees himself as an entrepreneur philosopher, and he likes the why question, and he really thinks that it is the motivational engine for everything. Today, his topic will be less is more. So hello, Tom, welcome.
Thank you for a nice introduction.
Thank you. We are so happy to see you here today with us.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask one thing, I would like to ask your opinion about one of your quotes that I read. So you said that you believe that we should leave the world in a better shape than it was when we were born. So what do you think about it, how we are doing it? Do we still have hope on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Perhaps it depends on the time of the day you ask me. In the morning, I'm much more positive than in the evening, so you shouldn't read climate reports, but to be very honest, it's a difficult time we live in. So I think my generation, I'm 54, is ruining the world on high speed, and I hope that the younger generation will change this. But there's a lot of stuff to be done.
Yes, so we hope we will try our best to make it faster, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay. First, thank you for again being here.
Shall I just start? Yeah. I think you see my short presentation on the screen. Less is more. I think a topic which fits well to Agile. A short introduction, because I think sometimes it helps to have some background. I'm Dutch, as you probably know. 54. My background was educated at Jesuit college, which has a little bit to do with purpose. The main experience in my life is that I survived cancer when I was 20. I had 20% chance of surviving, so I have a little bit different agenda in my life than, let's say, becoming the most successful entrepreneur. This is a topic about purpose. I started after my studies, as I thought I wanted to become a diplomat. I started as a consultant, and then I ended up in the world of finance. And at the moment, I'm one of the co-founders of Viisi, which does mortgage advice as a broker. So that's a short introduction. Short introduction about the company. It's a small company. Little bit more than 10 years ago, we are founded. We're more or less 50 people. We do 1 billion of mortgage volume a year. That's not huge. It's let's say between 3,000 and 4,000 mortgages, and it's an average mortgage volume. So the average mortgage volume in the Netherlands is around 350 or 400,000 euros. So nothing special in this case. Okay. We are, let's say, on this international environment, we are much more known for awards we got. For instance, the Great Place to Work award we got 4 years in a row in the Netherlands, and last year we were #1 in Europe in our category, which is the smallest category, and we got other awards as well, which were more about organizational design. So, for instance, the award of Hire, it's called Zero Distance Award. So this kind of awards. We are only active in the Netherlands, so only, let's say, people who want to finance a house or need a mortgage in the Netherlands, they can become clients. So we're not active in other countries. Yeah, what's the main purpose? You already mentioned it in the introduction. I believe that the purpose of business is not business, but the starting point is purpose. So we want to change the world of finance, make it, let's say, better, more sustainable, more focused on the long term. And I think that's a very old principle which you find nearly anywhere. So that's not a specific topic which only is discussed in the Netherlands. About our model, because sometimes there's a discussion that would be exotic. I actually don't think it's very exotic. We put our own people first. So we start with, let's say the starting point is that we think that when our own people are happy, that the rest will follow automatically. So also our clients will be happy. And then in the end, also the shareholders will be happy. That's the starting point. And that's a kind of circle. So the starting point is the purpose of the company that creates the energy or a sense of, let's say, belonging, but also that you know what's the reason you do the stuff you do. And then you go around all the time and you try to optimize your company. Why do we speak a lot on organizational design? That is that we try to keep things very simple, because it's very easy to make things very complicated, but it's very difficult to keep things very simple. And at a certain point on a certain platform, it's called Corporate Rebels, I was asked to put it in a less philosophical way and put it in a more practical way. And I wrote down the 10 principles we have in our company. And I would like to show you the 10 principles. And I will dive into a few of them, and I hope we have some time for some Q&A, because I think what people want to know in practice is how do you do this in reality. So the first rule is no bosses, but primus inter pares. Primus inter pares, I will dive into that later. It's about the rotation principle. We have no functions, no business cards. We all have the same title. It's called visionaire, so somebody who works at Viisi. We have a autonomy culture, so not a permission culture. The role has its accountability. We don't have top-down decisions, but more focused on horizontal team decision making. We don't have any bonuses, no bargaining on in the salary system. We have fixed salaries. I will also explain a little bit about it. Don't have performance reviews, only peer-to-peer feedback. There's a separation of salaries and peer-to-peer feedback. I will also dive into that later. We have no classical HR hiring, but the hiring is done by the team itself. We don't have any handbooks. And we have rules, also financial, regulatory rules, but we don't have own handbooks. We only have a golden rule. And we don't have a classical way of budgeting, but we try to do beyond budgeting, which also has become known by financial companies called handelsbanken, where you question the money you spend. And the last point is we have a culture of radical transparency. That means that all the information is shared in the company, even also externally. And the rule is exactly the opposite. So everything is shared unless there is a very good reason not to share the information. So what would be an example of information you would not share? That would be client data as an example, because that is personal, private information. So this is the overview. And I just want to dive into a few examples to give you a little bit more of an idea how it works in practice. So primus inter pares, first among equals, it's called. It's a very old principle. It was also used in Athens, Polish Athens, so 2,500 years ago. So if somebody says that's very innovative, or that's very modern, or that's very extreme, it's just It's just a very old principle. And you see this over and over again in a lot of parts of the world, that you have this kind of rotation principle where people decide in a circle, in holacracy, or in a team, or in a tribe. They choose somebody from the group itself. It's also in the Roman Empire, for as example, in the Roman army, you had exactly the same stuff, or the same principles. So the 6 or 7 people they chose who would be the leader role in this small battle entity. There's also a very practical example, because it's still in place. So I live in Switzerland, although I'm an entrepreneur in the Netherlands, and the Swiss government also has the rotation principle. So you don't have a president. Yeah, you have a president, but the president is one of those people here on the picture, and it rotates every year. So every year somebody else is taking the role of the president, which is perhaps exceptional, but it's this very old principle which still is in place in Switzerland. But you also had it in a lot of republic structures. So the old traditional merchant cities like Venice or Amsterdam or Hamburg, etc., they were ruled by the different families, and there also was this alternation principle or rotation principle. Or you also see it in big law firms, where the partners choose the leading partner. It's called a managing partner, for example, or consultancy firms, which are owned by the people themselves. It's another example. The self-organization of the teams. I just want to show this because it's also accessible from outside. So if you would just Google Viisi and Glassrock or Holacracy, you can dive into our organizational design and just see what roles, for instance, I have or my colleagues have, and then you see the roles and the accountabilities. So it's not only transparent internally, but also externally. Some information about our salary. It's a very complex process, but in the end, it means that you have different teams and you have different salary curves with a starting point and then a yearly increase, which you see in Dutch with those 200 euros, for instance, for advice every year. And the whole idea behind it is that you separate or try to separate salaries from the whole performance issue, because there is, from a scientific point of view, not a real correlation between performance and salary. So if people are interested, you can just dive into this. There's also a lot of literature. There are also a lot of podcasts and specific talks about this, also done by us. But the idea is you want to create psychological safety, because the performance of a team is much better if people share their vulnerabilities, but also give each other honest feedback. And the problem about giving feedback is that you're much more willing to give feedback to your colleagues if you don't have to think about harming the bonuses of your colleagues or harming, let's say, the salaries of your colleagues. So the whole idea behind this is that if you want to maximize the outcome of your teams, it doesn't make sense to take somebody out of this team and say you did much better and you give it a bonus, because it's counterproductive if you want that people in the team work together. So that's the way it works. And the other thing is that there is not a bargaining culture with somebody who joins the company. So if you join the company, we show you the curves or the salaries, and then say, okay, with your experience, you would earn in the company this salary, and then the application process starts. So you don't have a situation that at the end of an application process, somebody says, yes, I like the company. I also like the whole talks we had, but I only want to start at your company when you pay me this or that salary. So it's exactly the opposite. You know exactly what salary you will earn before the whole application process starts, and that helps a lot. Then another aspect is the golden rule. It's also a very classical old rule. It just means treat other people like you wanted to be treated yourself. And that doesn't mean in what direction. So if you talk about clients or partnerships or your environment or your local community, it's in the end about also good citizenship. And if you are long-term oriented, you know that you have to treat each other well, because otherwise people don't want to do business with you. Your clients don't want to do business with you if you don't treat them well. But it's the same for your employers or whatsoever. And the rest is common sense. And it's on purpose that we don't have any other rules. Why? Because if you write a lot of stuff down, then people search for the exceptions. And if you only have one golden rule, people discuss stuff and say, okay, how should I act if people feels a little bit uncertain? You will discuss this in a team. It's an example of something which is also the basic idea in every religion. So if you would be active in a lot of different countries or parts around the world, it's something which you can easily use as a kind of fundament, because everywhere in the world it's exactly the same. So it's a very basic, simple rule you can adapt. And the example, just to make it a little bit more easy to understand, is if you would, let's say, have a big cake and you would divide this, and I would sit there in front of somebody else and I would say, okay, let's divide this cake in an honest way. And I would just take a knife and give myself 3/4 of the cake and the other person 1/4, and you would just film the face of this person, no matter where in the world. You would see a kind of astonishing, what are you doing? Why do I only get 1/4, and why do you take 3/4 of the cake? So this kind of basic principles of treating each other in an honest and correct way, they are independent of, let's say, the country or the culture you live in, which makes it very easy to understand. Something also about radical transparency. I just already explained a little bit. It's the opposite example. So it's not the question, everything is secret, and then we discuss what we can share. No, it's the opposite. Everything is public. Like, for instance, we are used to, let's say, public debates or press, etc. And in our company, everybody knows, for instance, our financial situation. So there's not a question, how much cash do we have in the company, or what's the amount of salaries, or what do we pay for rent, etc., or the salaries of the founders, etc. Everybody knows everything, and that creates a kind of also rest, and not this kind of discussions at the coffee machine. Do you know what the founders earn, or do you know what we spend on this, or do you know what we spend on that? Everybody has access to this information, and that makes it also more easy or easier for the people to use this information to take the right decisions with their colleagues in the teams. Yeah, that was the short introduction to the examples. And what I would like to do is to invite you, and then I would just click back to those 10 principles. If people have questions or would like to dive into one of those rules or principles, feel free to ask me, because the main goal of this session should be that you get a question or get an answer to the question, and especially a question with which you would like to work or implement in your own organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your presentation. We have some questions for you that I would like to direct some of them to you, if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
That should be the goal of this.
Yeah.
Of this exercise.
Yeah. So the first question is, any examples of first among equals from business world, like from private sector? Is it realistic? How will it work? Like, will the C-levels will be rotating to CEO position, and will it be realistic? And also I am just like combining another question in it as well. So in siloed structures where we have departments, do you think it really works?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that, let's say, in the toughest environments, like investment banks or also consultancy, if you take McKinsey or big law firms, it's first among equals. So the partners of those law firms and consultancy firms or investment banks, they choose from their partners the one who should lead the company for a certain period of time.
Okay, so it's I think yes answer, right? So yeah, it works in some cases. Okay.
But the funny thing is that most of the time when we talk about management or organizational structures, we talk about the classical stock listed big corporations. But if you talk, for instance, about investment banks, or let's say McKinsey as an example, or those big law firms, I mean, that's very, very, very business oriented. These are very business oriented structures.
So I'm going to the next question. Companies spend incredible amount of resources to refine and implement performance management. And I think it's related to what you have talked about, fixed salaries and the no bonuses. So what are your recommendations for this?
Yeah, I can only share my own experiences. So we don't have any performance reviews. That doesn't mean that you don't have metrics. So we measure a lot, but people discuss in their teams what they want to measure and how they want to measure it. And the basic idea is that you split the two topics. So performance is dealt with in the teams. So it's peer-to-peer. And what we know from research is that peer-to-peer feedback is much stronger than, let's say, vertical feedback. So if a manager comes by and says, "Hey, I would like to talk with you about this," it's less intense than if you work with your colleagues right and left at the same table and say, "Sorry, but I thought we would share the work in this way. Why don't you just do as much as I do," or something like that? Or can I help you because I see you would call this, let's say, development need, etc. So this peer-to-peer feedback is much stronger, which we also know, let's say, from private surroundings. If you organize something together with your friends, and every year somebody else takes care of, let's say, this kind of trip or a weekend or whatsoever, and you would say at a certain point, "No, I'm not going. I think you're doing much better in this," then your friends would not accept this and would say, "No, sorry, but you also have to take your fair share." That's the idea behind it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that the interaction is much more direct and on a daily basis. So it takes time every day with colleagues. And because of the fact that there is no link to their salaries, there's a safe environment of giving this feedback, but also asking this feedback. So if you're not sure about a certain decision, it's much easier to ask, I'm not sure, shall we do it this way or that way? Because it's not seen as something negative that you don't feel secure about taking a decision. So you take the common knowledge of all your colleagues is used to make the best decisions.
There is another question, but I think it's already related to the previous one, but let me ask you, so if you want to add something. So with again, about fixed salaries, and no bonuses, how we can motivate the employees?
Yeah, if you're interested in that topic, bonuses are even counterproductive. So if you want to demotivate people, then you have to install bonuses. So there's a lot of literature done on that. There's a lot of, it's also called this Harvard examples, but it's also in a way it can also explain it in another way. So if you know that the team knows more than the individual, then you have to focus on the way a team works together. So there's a lot of research done by Google. It's called the Aristotle Project, and they wanted to know why do certain teams perform better than other teams. And the conclusion is that teams which perform better work, let's say their team culture or the way they work together in a better way than other teams. And then they just found out it had to do with what they call psychological safety. And the professor who became famous with that is Amy Edmondson. So if you want to create psychological safety, you should try to avoid that people work against each other, but you should support that people work together. And bonus is something which, if you, let's say, have 10 people in a team and you give bonus, you can give a bonus to 4 and the other 4 not, and 2 you have to fire as an example, then it's something which everybody understands doesn't help to create a good team culture and a collaboration between those people.
Yes, great answer. I think we're totally agree while we're nodding our yes. Okay, thank you, Tom, for your time and for being here today. It was a great presentation, and looking at the questions, everybody was like so interested in the subject. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me, and have a great conference.
Thank you. Bye-bye.